He clinked his wine glass with hers, again, like he owned the damn table. Like he owned her. Everyone laughed. Not at a joke. At me. To real men, he said, grinning that toothy, Jimbro grin he probably practiced in his rearview mirror. His Rolex caught the chandelier just right, flashing in my face like a middle finger made of gold. My wife, Danielle, laughed. Not politely. Full-throated. Leaned into him, hand on his forearm, those red nails scraping slightly as she whispered something meant to sting. I didn't flinch. I didn't toast. I just cut into the steak and pretended it wasn't cooked medium when I'd asked for rare. I had a better piece of meat to carve up soon. See, this wasn't some random humiliation at a restaurant. This was our anniversary dinner. And that man across the table? The alpha she'd been just friends with for 6 months, the one she insisted I was crazy to be suspicious about, was now seated in my place at the head of the table. At her request. In my goddamn house. Let me back up. The night started with a lie I let her tell. Just a small dinner, she said. Intimate, quiet, just close friends. Except she wore heels she hadn't touched in 3 years and sprayed on that perfume she used to reserve for vacations and only vacations. She smiled too hard when I said I'd set the table. No need, she said. I already took care of it. I walked in at 7:03. The lights were dim. Jazz playing. Real jazz. Coltrane. Not the cheap playlist she usually throws on when her sister visits. Wine already poured. 2 bottles breathing. And then the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there he was. Gavin. Tall. Too tan for February. The kind of guy who wears his shirt half unbuttoned like he's allergic to humility. He didn't say hi. He just nodded at me and brushed past like I was the butler. He brought crème brûlée from some downtown patisserie. Figured dessert should match the occasion. He winked at Danielle. Classy but with a bite. I should have decked him. But I didn't. I smiled, said, how thoughtful, and made a mental note. This arrogant prick just called me soft to my face using custard. The dinner guests arrived after. Her co-workers. A couple of friends of Gavin's I'd never met. No one from my side. Not even our son. She said he was busy. I later found out she told him I canceled. I spent the evening letting them mock me under the guise of banter. So, you really do accounting? One of Gavin's friends asked me, stifling a laugh. No, I don't do accounting. I run a firm. There's a difference. Right, he said, clearly not listening. Danielle says Gavin's helping her with some business ideas. Super exciting. I glanced at Danielle. She didn't deny it. She smiled like a kid with cake frosting on her lips. Then came the toast. Gavin stood up, his hand on Danielle's shoulder. I've known Danielle a short time, he said. But sometimes you just click with someone. When you see brilliance, you don't hesitate. You invest. They laughed. I looked down, stirred my wine, counted seconds like I was on a timer. You okay, buddy? Gavin asked, loud enough for the table to hush. I smiled. Just waiting for dessert. Because here's the thing. I'd seen it coming. Months ago. The shifts in tone. The gaslighting. The sudden self-growth phase that required solo weekends and secret lunches. I played dumb because dumb men get ignored. And ignored men get left alone to dig. I checked our shared calendar every Sunday. It's amazing how people forget digital footprints. You can delete texts, but you can't hide location metadata on synced photos if your phone auto-uploads. And Danielle? She never learned that the fancy mirror selfie she took in her hotel room showed a men's watch on the counter. Same watch I saw tonight. So I waited. I waited as Gavin ran his mouth and puffed his chest and talked about investments in real estate and CrossFit. I waited as Danielle let her hand drift too long on his thigh when she passed the butter. I waited through every eye roll someone tried to suppress when I made a basic joke or shared a story that didn't involve punching someone or buying a boat. Because I wasn't the fool here. I was the fuse. And the flame? That arrived when the doorbell rang again. Dessert. But not just crème brûlée. 2 uniformed officers. Gavin's face dropped. Danielle blinked like someone slapped her. I stood up slowly, wiped my mouth with a napkin. Gentlemen, I said. Right on time. I didn't even look at Gavin. I looked at Danielle. You never asked why I was suddenly okay with all the solo business trips, I said. Turns out, when you stop trying to control everything, people show you who they really are. The room went dead quiet. The officer stepped forward. Gavin Mitchell? He nodded, suddenly pale. You're being served. Not arrested. Served. Civil suit. Federal documents. Wire fraud investigation. But more on that in part 2. Tonight? Tonight was just the beginning of dessert. You know what they say, revenge is best served with a caramelized crust. Want to know what was in that manila envelope the officer slid across the table? Yeah, so did Danielle. But she wasn't laughing anymore. Not after what I did next. Danielle didn't blink. Not once. She sat there frozen, eyes darting from the officers to Gavin, to me, like someone trying to find the emergency exit in a room that suddenly had no doors. The manila envelope sat in front of Gavin like a live grenade. He hadn't touched it. No one had. Are you going to open it? I asked, casually sipping from my glass. The Cabernet had breathed perfectly. Full-bodied. Smooth. Like victory. I don't understand, Gavin stammered. The smirk was gone. The alpha act evaporated faster than the steam off the crème brûlée he never touched. One of the officers raised an eyebrow. You've been notified. If you don't want to read the contents, that's your decision. But your legal representation will. I turned to Danielle, whose hands were now clenched in her lap. The red nail polish had chipped slightly, probably from all that frantic phone typing I'd been watching her do in the reflection of our microwave door each night. That's how I first noticed it, by the way. She had this nervous tick. When she thought I wasn't looking, she'd delete texts mid-sentence, thumb moving so fast you'd think she was trying to scrub evidence. Too bad for her. I'd replaced the kitchen microwave camera with a tiny fisheye. Cost me $49 on Amazon. Best purchase of my life. What is this? Danielle finally whispered. What the hell is going on? Oh, honey, I said, laying my fork down gently. You didn't think Gavin was just charming you with dessert metaphors, did you? The man you've been playing house with? He's a walking Ponzi scheme. Gavin stood up, pushing back his chair so violently it screeched. This is a mistake. This is slander. The officer didn't flinch. Your name is on 10 separate wire transfers linked to fraudulent investment holdings, sir. We're not here for theatrics. We're here for due process. But I didn't do anything. Danielle rose too, grabbing his arm. Wait, fraud? No, that's not right. Gavin has a business. He's helped me invest. I raised my eyebrows at that. So it was true. She was funneling money to him. I didn't even have confirmation until now. Bless her heart for making my case airtight. You opened a joint venture with him, didn't you? I asked, smiling like I was genuinely curious. Used the inheritance your aunt left you last year? The account I didn't touch. Danielle's mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a drowning fish trying to speak. Because if so, I continued, you might want to sit back down. That makes you a legal partner in a fraudulent entity. Might explain why the SEC subpoenaed your laptop last week. Gasps rippled through the table. Someone dropped a spoon. No one moved to pick it up. You're bluffing, Danielle spat, voice shaking. You're bitter. You've always been. Paranoid. I interrupted. Yes, I remember. That was the word you used when I asked why Gavin showed up at your yoga retreat in Tahoe. Coincidence, you said. You're paranoid. It's all your overtime talking, right? Danielle didn't answer. One of Gavin's friends, the one who mocked my job earlier, suddenly looked a lot more interested in his napkin. But that wasn't the twist. That wasn't the thing. See, I knew Danielle had signed papers she never read. She always did that. Got lazy after a few glasses of wine. I used to protect her from that habit. But when I saw her email inbox one night, left open on her tablet, by accident, I noticed a digital signature confirmation from a law firm she didn't recognize. So I did what any paranoid husband would do. I forwarded the PDF to myself. Quietly. Saved it. Then I had my lawyer add a rider to the document she signed. An amendment. Buried deep. Harmless looking. Legal boilerplate. That amendment? It granted me full disclosure rights and operational control of any joint asset she opened for the purposes of personal development ventures. Vague enough to slip under radar. Specific enough to let me legally access her and Gavin's little crypto startup. Oh, and one more thing, I said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Here's the security footage from our garage. From 6 weeks ago. You remember, Danielle? The night you said you were at Stacy's baby shower. She didn't need to watch the video. The color drained from her face before she even touched it. "You didn't," she murmured. "Oh, I did." See, Gavin thought he was slick. But he parks like a moron. Blocked the security camera twice before I realized it was intentional. So I repositioned the lens. I stood up slowly. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't yell. That's what they expected. That's what cowards do. "You're not just cheating on me," I said. "You were about to hand our family's name over to a con artist." Danielle stared at Gavin. "You said," she began. He yanked his arm away. "I told you to read everything before you signed. You said your husband was too soft to fight back." "Wrong again. Police will be back in the morning," the officer said as they left. "This was just the notification. Your attorneys will contact you by noon tomorrow." The room emptied like a funeral reception. No more smirks. No more toasts. Just two untouched desserts, the scent of burnt sugar lingering. Danielle stood there like a statue in stilettos, still gripping her wine glass. It shook slightly. "Why now?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eye. "Because I needed the paperwork to finish processing, and because you're about to find out what it feels like to be erased." Then I walked out. But I wasn't done. The next morning, Danielle would wake up to a missing car, an empty bank account, and a legal notice stapled to the door. Revenge wasn't the end goal. Correction was. And Gavin? He made one final mistake that night, something I caught that no one else did. At exactly 6:12 a.m., Danielle screamed. It was a brittle, involuntary sound. The kind you make when you realize the world's been rearranged while you slept, when you open the door in your robe, barefoot, expecting a morning paper, and instead find a yellow legal notice nailed through the wood, sharp and crooked. Like some goddamn biblical plague just dropped on your porch. Notice of temporary freeze and separation of shared assets. I had it served at sunrise. Symbolic. Danielle used to say mornings were sacred, that they set the tone for your spirit. So I decided to ruin hers right out of the gate. I wasn't home anymore. Packed a duffel and left in the night. Took only what was mine. Left my wedding band on the kitchen counter beside her emptied wine glass and a single flash drive labeled, "For court." That flash drive contained 8 weeks of Gavin and Danielle's little business meetings, all captured by a refurbished security system I told her was fried during last year's power surge. You'd be amazed what a $99 cloud account and a rigged smoke detector can capture. Crystal clear audio, too. She never noticed the blinking red light above the pantry. By noon, my attorney confirmed Danielle had tried to access our joint account 4 separate times. Denied, every time. Then she tried our son's college fund. She entered the wrong passcode 3 times and triggered an alert. That fund was under my custodianship. I watched her try to drain it. For Gavin? To lawyer up? Or maybe just to run. Didn't matter. It was sealed tighter than her fake friendship with Stacy, the same friend she blamed for that Tahoe weekend Gavin happened to attend. I sat in a rental apartment that overlooked the river, sipping coffee, waiting. Because Gavin wasn't handling it nearly as well. At 1:46 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a blocked number. "Hey, this is Gavin. Listen, man, I don't know what you think you know, but you and we're not enemies here, all right? I never meant to hurt you. I didn't even know Danielle was still with you until, months in. I'm just trying to protect what I built. We should talk." I played the message twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because it made something very clear. He was unraveling and scared. He wasn't some master manipulator. He was an amateur who underestimated an accountant. Because while Danielle was busy melting down over frozen funds, Gavin was discovering something worse. His name wasn't just on the SEC file. It was on a secondary LLC I had quietly registered in Nevada 6 weeks ago. The name? Brass Fig Ventures, LLC. Sounded real enough. Real enough to fool him into thinking Danielle had pulled the strings, especially when she forwarded him the incorporation docs I'd pre-written and accidentally CC'd him on from her laptop. Yes, I used her computer. Yes, I knew the password. She once said, smugly, that she never needed to write anything down because she wasn't the type to forget things. Except people forget they ever told you that. So now Gavin thought Danielle set him up. Thought she used his name on her shady venture to shield herself. And Danielle? Well, she thought Gavin used her as a front to access a slush fund. 2 liars. 1 trap. No honor among thieves. By 4 p.m., I received an email from Danielle. Subject line, "Can we please talk?" I didn't open it, just forwarded it to my attorney. But I read the preview text. I didn't know about the LLC. Gavin must have forged my... Of course he did, sweetheart. And Gavin? That evening, he tried to file a fraud claim on the Nevada LLC. Except Brass Fig Ventures was already in my name. And the operating agreement, timestamped and notarized, showed him listed as Chief Financial Officer. He had signed the onboarding docs during one of their hotel rendezvous when Danielle surprised him with champagne and a laptop. He was too drunk to read, too arrogant to question. That's what made it so easy. One night, I had switched the template. Instead of the dummy pitch deck Danielle downloaded, the file was a corporate onboarding form, one I slid into full legal recognition with a single DocuSign trick. Once his signature was recorded, all I had to do was let the timer run. The feds hadn't moved yet, but they would. Gavin had 2 weeks, maybe less. And Danielle? She called my mother. My mother. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not since Danielle called her, emotionally suffocating at Thanksgiving because Mom asked if we were planning a second child. My mother called me the moment she hung up. She sounded like a little girl, she said. Didn't even say sorry. Just asked where you were. I told Mom I was fine, and that Danielle would be calling again soon, because she hadn't found the safe deposit box key yet, or the photos inside it, or the one object, simple, stupid, utterly damning, that would end her chances of crawling out clean. A keychain. One she gifted Gavin. One I recognized. The same keychain I spotted dangling from the ignition in the garage footage. She thought it was harmless, decorative, but it wasn't. It was unique, custom-made, and engraved with 2 words I knew would be enough to destroy her in court, in her social circle, and maybe even with our son. Because once he saw it, he'd know. He'd know what she did, and who she really was. The keychain said, Room 214. Forever. Nothing else. Just those words. Polished steel, leather trim. One of those boutique hotel novelties they sell at the front desk for $18.99, a cheesy souvenir for a one-night stand that apparently wasn't so one night after all. I remembered it because Danielle bought 2. I was there. It was 6 years ago. Some forgettable weekend in Monterey when we were still trying to save whatever scraps were left of our marriage. Back then, it meant something to her, at least enough to laugh, kiss me in the elevator, and say Room 214, forever, like it was our inside joke. She gave us the second one. She handed him our memory. And now it was on camera, swinging gently from the ignition of Gavin's Mercedes the night she swore she was at Stacy's. My attorney's paralegal couldn't believe it when she slowed the footage and zoomed in. You sure that's what it says? She asked. Oh, I'm sure, I said. Zoom again. Clear as day. That was the moment my patience rotted into venom. Not because of the betrayal I had digested that months ago, but because she recycled our symbol to brand a man like Gavin. A con artist with pec implants and all the emotional depth of a puddle in Phoenix. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to text. I was going to let the keychain do the talking. Danielle didn't know I had the footage. Gavin didn't know I was watching his meltdown in real time. By mid-morning the next day, he had fired off a furious voicemail to Danielle. And thanks to a burner phone I slipped into Gavin's gym bag. Yes, I followed him once. Old habits die useful. I had all his audio. The line was always open. One of those cheap prepaid bugs disguised as a dead Android with a cracked screen. He left it powered on in his glove compartment like a true genius. Danielle? Gavin snapped. You swore you never told him about that room. You told me it was our thing. Now it's evidence? You think I'm going down for you? Hell no. You fix this. You tell him I forged it. You lie. You owe me. That was enough. I sent the clip to Danielle anonymously. No subject line. Just a Dropbox link and a password. 214 forever. It took her 15 minutes to call me. I didn't answer. She texted. Please. I didn't mean for this. Just talk to me. Then 5 more texts. Then silence. Then finally. He was supposed to protect me. Ah, there it is. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was scared. That's when I knew she still didn't get it. None of them did. This wasn't about broken vows or hurt feelings. This was about precision. By nightfall, Gavin's world started to fray in public. A Reddit thread popped up on r/investing with a burner post titled, Beware of Gavin Mitchell /alphayield.io. Anyone else scammed? The comments poured in. Yeah, I lost $3,000 in a fake crypto course. Promised a dividend. Never saw a penny. Guy had a Lumbo on the site banner and never once showed a verified portfolio. Ran the same exact webinar under a different name last year. Total rug pull. By midnight, his site was taken offline. And Danielle? She showed up at my door. Not the marital home, my door. The temporary place by the river. I watched her through the peephole. Hair undone. Face streaked. Makeup melted off like a wax figure left in the sun. She clutched a single manila envelope. She knocked once. Waited. Then slid the envelope under the door and walked away without a word. Inside? Our wedding photo. The original. Not a copy. And a sticky note that said, "He lied. I was stupid. I know I can undo it. But please don't ruin me in front of our son." So now she remembers we have a son. She didn't mention him when she swore Gavin was just a mentor. Didn't mention him when she skipped his soccer finals for that emergency board meeting. Didn't mention him when she pawned off bedtime duty for 3 weeks in a row while Gavin taught her about wealth mindset. You know what I did with that photo? I didn't burn it. I didn't shred it. I mailed it back to her. No return address. But this time, I added something inside. That keychain. No note. Just that. Let her explain that when our son asks why daddy isn't coming home and why mommy gets quiet every time someone says 214. But the real twist? Gavin wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't the one who orchestrated the funnel scam behind Alpha Yield. No, there was someone else. Someone Gavin owed. Someone neither of them saw coming. And now he was calling me. Because Gavin talked too much. And I listened to everything. The call came in at 2:03 a.m., a number with no caller ID, just the word unknown glowing on my lock screen like a bad omen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Not because I hesitated, because I wanted him to. I wanted whoever was on the other end to feel like they were the one waiting for permission. Mr. Callahan, the voice rasped. Older. Controlled. Not Gavin. Not police. Someone who'd smoked cigars long enough to sound like sandpaper, but still spoke like he could buy your house, your block, and your retirement before breakfast. I assume you know who this is. I didn't. Not yet. But I stayed silent. You're more disciplined than your wife. That's refreshing. Bingo. I leaned back in the chair, stared out at the black water winding beneath the river lights. She's not my wife anymore, I said. She's a liability I've already accounted for. A chuckle. Dry. Calculated. Let's speak plainly, Mr. Callahan. You've taken something that doesn't belong to you. Brass Fig Ventures was never meant to reach public record. There it was. The real owner. Gavin was a mouthpiece. A puppet. Flashy teeth and discount charm to lure in half-literate crypto brothers. But this man, he was the puppeteer. I almost thanked him for confirming it. Funny, I said. I found it quite easy to file. Your boy Gavin signed everything. Enthusiastically. A pause. Just long enough to feel like a threat. Gavin was useful, the man finally said. Until he got greedy. Or sloppy. Depending on how you want to spin it. But I've always admired efficiency, and you. He cleared his throat. You have a talent for timing. There was something deeply wrong about being praised by a ghost in a suit. I could practically smell the mahogany and hush money through the line. What do you want? I asked, flat. You're sitting on infrastructure tied to 4 offshore holdings, he replied. They were never meant to be linked. You exposed one. You tied them together. That's dangerous. For you. For me. For a great many people who prefer discretion to discovery. There it was again, precision. He wasn't worried about the money. He was worried about exposure. About audit trails. What's your offer? I asked, because I already knew there'd be one. I'll make this clean, he said. You return all documentation connected to Brass Fig, pull down the filings, and sign over your proxy stake. In return, I'll ensure your name doesn't appear in any investigation. And if I don't, you'll be buried in subpoenas so deep you'll forget what day it is before you ever see trial. I exhaled. Calm. Even. Then I reached into the drawer, pulled out the velvet box I hadn't opened in years. My cufflinks. Engraved. A gift from Danielle, back when her lies were still in their infancy. I popped one out, twisted off the head. Inside? A micro SD card. I'd copied everything. Twice. Sounds tempting, I said. But there's a complication. Oh, I don't like being underestimated. Silence. You think this is about ego, the man said. It isn't. It's about control. Something you're about to lose. He hung up. I smiled. Because he just told me exactly what I needed. He was scared. Which meant he'd move. Which meant I could bait him. The next morning, I walked into a real estate office under a pseudonym and bought a lease on a private storage unit. One I filled with paper copies of every document Gavin had signed. Every file I'd siphoned from Danielle's laptop. Printouts of emails, offshore account screenshots, phone logs. All labeled. All organized. All inside a fireproof safe with one little surprise. A silver music box. It had belonged to Danielle's grandmother. I took it from the attic before I left. Not for nostalgia. For insurance. Because the woman on the lease of that safe deposit unit was Danielle. I forged the signature from a birthday card she wrote me last year. She wouldn't know it until the day investigators, real ones, knocked on her door with a warrant. When she'd open it, confused, and they'd say, "We have a location tied to your name." And what they'd find? Evidence. All of it. In her name. With her fingerprints. Not mine. Because Gavin's puppet master thought I was just a bitter husband with an axe to grind. He didn't know I'd been documenting since before Gavin even arrived. Didn't know I wanted to be threatened. Didn't know Danielle's gaslighting wasn't what broke me. It was what trained me. He'd come again. Soon. But next time, he wouldn't call. Next time, he'd send someone. And I was ready. He showed up 2 days later. Didn't knock. Didn't ring. Just stood there, on the far end of the parking lot, leaning against a black sedan like he owned the pavement, arms crossed, one foot up against the wheel well like this was a casual drop-in and not an implicit threat. Gray suit. Aviators. Close-cropped beard. Not a talker. Not a Gavin. I clocked him through the peephole the moment he stepped out of the car. He didn't even glance at my door. Just waited. Like a dog trained to fetch when whistled. I brewed coffee. 2 cups. One for me. One I poured down the sink. Let him stew. At 11:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Come outside. We need to talk. I didn't reply. I opened the blinds halfway, just enough so he'd see movement, then turned the deadbolt and stepped out. No jacket. No apology. Just silence and sunlight. You're early, I said. He gave a slow nod. He said you'd be difficult. I smiled. He must have forgotten to mention I'm dangerous too. He didn't take the bait. I'm not here to intimidate you, he said. I'm here to clean this up. Quietly. Efficiently. So what are you? Corporate sanitation? He didn't answer. Just opened the car door and gestured to the passenger seat. I didn't move. He sighed. There's no threat here. Not today. Funny, I said. You guys keep calling like this is a negotiation. It's not. It's a countdown. His mouth twitched. First crack in the armor. You've made this bigger than it needed to be. No, I corrected. They did. When Gavin humiliated me in my own home. When Danielle stole from our son's future to fund a fraud. When some faceless voice on a burner line told me to roll over like a good boy. He didn't argue. He adjusted his cuff, then said, he wants the original drive. Not the copies. Not the files in the cloud. The original. He's willing to offer full amnesty for you and your wife. She's not my wife. Pause. Then she's collateral. And collateral is negotiable. And there it was. The mistake. The sentence that told me everything I needed. They didn't just want to erase Gavin's mess. They wanted to frame Danielle for it. Bury her under the very pile of evidence I'd built. She was guilty. Sure. But not of their crimes. She was messy. Selfish. Cruel. But she wasn't a criminal mastermind. They were about to make her their scapegoat. And that almost made me feel something for her. Almost. I walked up to the car, leaned in just enough to smell the cologne on his lapel, expensive, sharp, wrong for a guy pretending to be subtle. She's not worth protecting, I said. But she is useful. That made him smile. Real smile. First one. So you'll hand it over? I tapped his door frame. I'll send you something tonight. Be ready. Then I turned and walked away. Back inside, I pulled the decoy drive from my sock drawer. Labeled it Master. Encrypted. Loaded with dummy files, enough real metadata to pass a lazy glance. Let them chase shadows. At 9 p.m., I dropped it off at a mailbox 3 towns over. Prepaid label. Delivered by morning. But that wasn't the real move. The real move was across town, inside a dusty file cabinet at the office where I rented space once a month to consult. Tax reasons. Nobody looked there. Not even me. Inside that drawer, the real drive. No label. Just taped to the underside of the bottom drawer, behind a folder labeled Q1 Receipts 2017. It contained everything. Chain of ownership records, email exports, a voice memo of Gavin and Danielle mapping out investor funneling during a brainstorming session at the Four Seasons, and my personal favorite, a banking authorization video where Gavin lifts a glass of wine and says, "To offshore freedom, baby." Let them try to scrub that. I sent the burner phone a single message. Delivery en route. Confirm when received. They would. I knew they would. And when they decrypted it, they'd think they'd won. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. Danielle called. Not from her cell. From a blocked landline I didn't recognize. "I need to see you," she said, voice tight. "It's about Gavin." "What about him?" "He disappeared." I sat up. No contact. His phone's dead. His apartment was ransacked. And this morning I found a letter taped to my rearview mirror. No envelope. Just my name on a folded sheet. What did it say? She hesitated. It said, he gave them everything. And now they want silence. That was all. That was enough. I hung up. Because silence was exactly what I'd planned for next. The letter Danielle found on her windshield wasn't just a warning. It was a message for me. She didn't know it, but I did. Because the words weren't hers. Weren't Gavin's, either. They were mine. 6 months ago, I had drafted that exact phrase. He gave them everything. And now they want silence. In an unsent email to my lawyer. It was part of a hypothetical scenario I wrote in frustration after Danielle's third business trip to Palm Springs. She forgot to log out of her Gmail on our shared tablet. I saw her itinerary. Saw Gavin booked a king suite at the same resort the same weekend. I was angry. Careless. I typed it out. Never hit send. But I saved it. In a folder labeled DNR, Do Not React. Only 3 people had access to that tablet. Me, Danielle, and our son. And our son had been away at camp. Which means the message was read, remembered, copied. Whoever left that letter on Danielle's windshield had access to my drafts. They were already inside. I needed to move. I called my attorney. Asked him to prepare a trust transfer. Not for Danielle. For our son. Clean title. Protected assets. Offshore proxy. No trace to me. He didn't ask questions. He knew the tone. By 11 a.m., I was driving. Not to the storage unit. Not to my apartment. To my father's cabin. My father had passed 3 years ago. Left behind a place in the hills no one visited. Too cold. Too remote. No cell signal. We used it once a year to fish and pretend we liked each other. But it had one thing I needed. A safe in the floorboards. Installed back in the 70s, when paranoia still wore a flag pin. I brought the real drive. The originals. The contracts. The files. I packed them into a Pelican case, waterproof and sealed. I placed it inside that safe, locked it with the combination burned into memory, and then I waited. That night, I received the confirmation. The decoy drive had been received and verified. They bought it, which meant they'd moved to clean house, which meant Gavin was either dead, hidden, or about to become someone else entirely. Danielle had no idea. She texted again. "If you know anything about where he is, please." I ignored it, because while she was busy unraveling, he, the man behind the calls, was quiet. Too quiet. Until the following morning. I was drinking black coffee from an enamel mug when the cabin's generator sputtered. Off. Then on. Then off again. And then I heard the car. Engine low. Tires crunching gravel like broken glass. I didn't move to the door. I didn't flinch. Instead, I walked to the back room. Pulled the bolt from the old hunting closet. Inside, a Remington 870, dusty but cleaned. My father's legacy wasn't wisdom. It was over-preparation. The car door opened. I watched from the shadows through the thin blinds. Not a suit this time. Not a thug. A woman. Late 30s. Black boots. Black coat. Hair tied back. No makeup. Calm. Composed. She wasn't here to threaten me. She was here to replace me. I opened the door before she could knock. "You're early," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "I like to beat the weather." It's not supposed to snow until Saturday. I wasn't talking about the forecast. We stood there. No one moved. You sent the drive, she said. I sent a drive, I corrected. She nodded. He knows it's fake. Of course he does. It's why you're here. Pause. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small, black notebook. Tossed it on the table inside without asking permission. What's this? Insurance. I flipped it open. Inside, Gavin's name. Danielle's. Mine. Dates. Times. Notes in tight handwriting. They'd been watching me. Documenting me. You missed a few things, I said. We had to move fast. Gavin was sloppy. And now he's gone. She looked me dead in the eye. He's handled. Not dead. Not alive. Just handled. And Danielle? She's next, the woman said. Unless you hand over the real contents. No, I said simply. Then she takes the fall. She already did. The woman smiled. Almost. You're smarter than he said. I smiled back. I always am. She stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Here's what happens now. You walk away. You disappear. You forget this ever happened. You never see her again. You never say Gavin's name again. You become normal. I leaned in close. Make me. She froze. Just a flicker. Because that was the moment she realized I hadn't come here to hide. I came here to end it. What she didn't know? Someone else was already listening. Not a cop. Not a lawyer. Someone far, far worse for them. And he was recording everything. He wore a delivery uniform. Not a badge. Not a wire. No gun visible. Just khakis, a navy windbreaker, and a thermal bag slung over one shoulder that said, Riley Subs. He knocked once, sharp. The woman, who hadn't told me her name and never would turn slowly. Her face didn't move, but her shoulders shifted just enough for me to clock it. Tension. Awareness. Recognition. She knew him. But she hadn't expected him. I opened the door. Order for Charles, he said with a smile, holding out the bag. His eyes flicked to her, then back to me. Cold cuts, right? Right, I said, playing along. Extra mustard. He stepped inside like he lived there. Like he built the cabin. She backed away just slightly, recalibrating. Did he send you? She asked. No, the man said, unzipping the bag and pulling out a portable black device the size of a hardback book. He thinks I'm in Geneva. She tilted her head. You're supposed to be out. I was, he said, powering on the device. It made a soft click as it lit up. Now she was angry. You violated protocol. And you tried to burn an asset without authorization, he said calmly. We're even. I stepped back and let them dance. The woman's voice sharpened. This wasn't your operation. No, he said, but it's about to be. She glanced at me, then back to him. He's dirty. He's useful. Their words were clinical, like surgeons debating what to cut and what to keep. He turned to me. I need the drive. The real one. And what do you offer in return? Her, he said, tilting his head toward the woman. That threw her. You don't have the authority, she snapped. He ignored her. She's been tying off loose ends. Sloppy. You're not the only one she paid a visit to. Is Gavin. Alive, he said. But not yours anymore. I laughed. I couldn't help it. This was a cannibal family of shadows, and someone had just been voted off the island. She started to speak, but he cut her off. Enough. Your car's already been disabled. A cleanup team's en route. You'll be gone before sunset. That's when she lunged. Not at him. At the table. Toward the black notebook she dropped earlier. But I moved first. Swiped it into my coat pocket just as she reached for it. He stepped between us, calm as glass. That's it, he said, and for the first time, his voice carried real weight. She froze. Chest heaving. Hands clenched. Like a tiger realizing the cage door wasn't just shut, it was welded. Then she turned to me. You think you're in control, she hissed. I know I am, I replied. Because I'm the only one in this room who's not lying to themselves. She laughed bitterly. You're still doing this for her. No, I said. I'm doing this to her. And then I tossed the notebook to the man. He opened it. Flipped through. Nodded. It's all here. Timelines, movement logs, Gavin's proxies. Enough to make everyone paranoid for the next decade. I figured, I said. I read the first 10 pages and nearly had a stroke. He smiled. Genuinely. You're wasted in accounting. Not anymore. We stared at each other a moment longer. Then I pulled the real drive from my coat. Laid it on the table. Once. That's it. You get one copy. Understood. He took it, slipped it into a lined pouch, sealed it with a military-grade strip. Then he turned to the woman. You're not going to remember this, he said. Her lips curled. I always remember. He nodded once. Shame. Then he hit a button on his device. She slumped. Not unconscious, just still. Like her nervous system had been dialed down to zero. A medical override. Probably implanted. Probably illegal in every country that still had a soul. He caught her, lowered her gently into the chair, and pulled the blinds. You ever want to disappear for real, he said. Call this number. He slid a white card across the table. Just a phone number. No name. What about Danielle? I asked. Gavin's gone. This woman's out. That leaves her. She doesn't know anything, I said. She knows enough to sink her own future, but not yours. So she's free. I don't want her free. He paused, then smiled like he'd been waiting for me to say that. I thought you might feel that way. From the side pouch of his jacket, he pulled out a black envelope. Inside, a single photo. Danielle, sitting at a table, alone, talking to someone just off frame. The timestamp? 2 days after Gavin vanished. I looked closer. The man across from her wore a watch I recognized. The same model that had flashed in Gavin's first toast at our anniversary. But Gavin never wore his on the right wrist. This man did. I looked up. She's still lying, I said. He nodded. She always was. The man in the photo wasn't Gavin. But the watch? The body language? The way Danielle was leaning in, hand curled around her wine glass, legs crossed, that manipulative half-smile she wore when she was negotiating with a man she thought she could control, it was identical. And the man across from her, he had the same build. The same square jaw. Just older. Cleaner. Scar on his neck, just above the collar line. A scar Gavin didn't have. I looked at the photo again. The restaurant was familiar. Not one I'd ever been to, but one Danielle had mentioned in passing years ago. The kind of place where everything's darkwood and secrets, she'd said. Apparently, she liked the atmosphere. The man across the table from her was not some date. He was someone I'd seen once before, buried deep in a background report I pulled on Gavin during the early days of suspicion. A corporate ghost. No digital footprint. No social media. A single name. Edward Lorne. Gavin's handler. Not a puppet master, worse. A middleman for middlemen. One of those rare creatures that billionaires trust with their secrets because he doesn't exist in any traditional sense. If she was meeting with Lorne, it meant two things. Gavin's disappearance didn't break her. She was trying to replace him. I should have been surprised. I wasn't. Danielle was the kind of woman who didn't just land on her feet. She sharpened them and turned them into weapons. And now she was trying to rebuild the empire I just burned. The man in the windbreaker, the one who called himself Riley, studied my face while I processed the photo. He didn't say a word until I laid it flat on the table. She didn't skip a beat, I muttered. No, Riley said. She evolved. He handed me a flash drive. This one unmarked. What's this? Surveillance. Last 72 hours. She's made contact with 2 other former associates of Lawrence. One's out of Jakarta, the other's in Berlin. She's building something again. Quietly, cautiously, but definitely. My jaw tightened. So this is her pivot. She's going full black market. She's not just in it, Riley said. She wants to run it. And she's smart enough to do it, if someone doesn't stop her. I stared at the envelope again. Thought about our son. About the college fund she tried to gut. About the way she cried crocodile tears at my door, begging me not to ruin her in front of him. She wasn't scared of collapse. She was scared of being irrelevant. You said she was free, I said. She was, he replied. Until we got this. He tapped the photo. I picked up the flash drive, weighed it in my palm. Then I asked the one question I'd avoided for months. Is she dangerous? Riley didn't hesitate. More than Gavin ever was. He was reckless. Emotional. She's strategic. And angry. I nodded slowly. The weight of it settled in my chest. I want to see her, I said. Riley's face barely moved. You sure? No. I stood anyway. But I need to see what she looks like when she lies to me again. She was staying in a high-rise condo downtown. Rented under a fake name, Marie Halston, but the unit was in a building her best friend's husband owned. Sloppy. Danielle always assumed if you changed just enough, no one would dig deeper. I didn't knock. Riley disabled the keypad. We walked in. Danielle was seated at the kitchen island in a silk robe, sipping green tea like she hadn't just tried to re-enter the criminal underworld through the same back door I kicked shut 2 weeks ago. When she saw me, her face didn't flicker. Not a blink. Not a twitch. Just that cool, practiced tone you could have called. I laughed. God, that infuriating calm. You meeting Lorne now? That's just brunch. She set her mug down, slow and deliberate. You really don't understand the world you stepped into. No, I said. But I understood you. Enough to know you were never Gavin's victim. You were just using him until something better came along. She tilted her head. Better than what, exactly? An accountant with a hero complex? I'm not trying to be a hero, I said, stepping closer. I'm just here to end your second act before it starts. She smiled. You don't have the stomach for it. I pulled the photo from my coat and laid it on the table. Her smile cracked for just a second. Then she recovered. You know what I see when I look at that picture? She asked. Desperation? I offered. She shook her head. Evolution. I stared at her for a long moment. You were willing to take down our family to chase this. She leaned forward. Our family was already dead the day you decided being invisible was safer than being seen. And that hurt. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was. I turned to leave. Riley followed. But before I walked out, I said just loud enough for her to hear. Check your safe. She blinked. I smiled. Because while she was busy orchestrating her new kingdom, I'd already opened the gates. Replaced her encrypted business files with a drive full of everything she feared most. Not documents. Not video. But a single item. A scanned copy of our son's drawing. The one he made when he was 5. It was of us. A family. Holding hands. Smiling. She had thrown it out years ago during a remodel. I pulled it from the trash. Restored it. Saved it. And now? It was the last thing she'd find when she tried to open her new empire. Because the past has a way of haunting people who pretend it never mattered. And Danielle was about to be very haunted. Danielle didn't call. She didn't text. Didn't scream. Didn't beg. She just disappeared. 2 days after our visit, Riley confirmed her condo lease had been terminated. The unit was stripped clean. No forwarding address, no storage rental, nothing. Her social media accounts deactivated. Her name pulled from every surface like a ghost vacuumed from the system. She went dark, but not silent. See, when someone like Danielle vanishes, it's never a retreat. It's a repositioning. And I knew exactly where she'd go. There's a pattern to people like her. They don't hide in basements or faraway islands. They hide in networks. They slip into old contacts, borrow credibility, borrow names. They become someone else, someone with purpose. So I baited the only hook I had left. Legacy. Our son. I filed a motion in family court. Nothing dramatic. Just a formal amendment requesting sole custody, based on Danielle's extended absence and involvement in volatile financial partnerships. Nothing that screamed criminal, just enough to trigger her ego. The kind of legal jab that doesn't draw blood, but bruises public image. Riley flagged the response the moment it hit. She didn't reply through an attorney. She replied herself from a new email account tied to a server in South Africa, but written in that same Danielle voice. Clipped, condescending, with the underlying tone of a woman who believes she's still one chess move ahead. Don't weaponize him. You got your revenge. Isn't that enough? I stared at the screen. Isn't that enough? That was the question, wasn't it? Was it enough to ruin Gavin? To dismantle her little crypto empire? To bankrupt her public image, reduce her to shadows and burner phones? Was it enough to make her watch it all collapse without screaming once? I typed a response. It's not revenge. It's removal. You're not being punished, you're being deleted. Then I clicked send. And waited. She never wrote back. But someone else did. A week later, I received a manila envelope at my office. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in the upper corner. Inside? A key. One I hadn't seen in 10 years. It belonged to a storage unit we used to rent when we first moved in together. A dumpy little place near the train station. We used it for boxes we didn't want to unpack, old wedding stuff, junk we swore we'd sort through and never did. There was no note. Just the key. I drove there the next morning. The manager didn't even ask for ID. Just slid the form across the counter with a tired grunt. Unit 24B. When I opened it, The light flickered twice before settling. In the center of the otherwise empty unit sat a single plastic bin. Inside, every photo, every keepsake, every piece of us she had ever buried. Our wedding album. Her hospital bracelet from when our son was born. A dried-out flower from a date night she once called the night I knew. The stuffed bear I won her in a rigged boardwalk game. And on top, placed with the kind of care I hadn't seen from her in years, was that same crayon drawing. Us. Holding hands. Smiling. I didn't cry. I just sat. In silence. And realized that I wasn't angry anymore. Because anger means you still want something back. But I didn't. I didn't want her love. Her apology. Her understanding. I wanted nothing. And in that, I was free. The final loose thread was mine. Not Danielle. Not Gavin. Not Lauren. Not even Riley. Because revenge isn't the moment they suffer. It's the moment you stop needing them to. I locked the unit behind me. Walked away. Never looked back. And as I crossed the parking lot, I pulled the key from my pocket and dropped it into the nearest storm drain. Let the past rust where it belongs. In the dark. Unclaimed. Forever.